Let's take a look at this weekend's auction report. There's a total of 3,139 properties going to auction. In Sydney, there'll be 862 auctions, with another 285 auctions around the state. Melbourne has the most auctions with 1,262 and another 79 around Victoria. Brisbane has 173 properties going to auction, with another 167 around Queensland. In Adelaide, there's 149 homes going under the hammer, with another 10 around the state. Lastly, in the capital Canberra, there are 132 auctions. Moving on to the most viewed properties going to auction this weekend, Victoria dominates the top half of the list, with 20 Collins Street, Red Hill taking the top position. Situated on the Mornington Peninsula, this property is styled as a French provincial home and even has a front door made out of oak sourced from a chateau in France. 127 South Road, Brighton, Victoria comes second with the highest price guide on the list. That's between $7 million to $7.7 million. 6 Coleman Lane, Aspendale, also in Victoria, with a price guide of $2.5 million, closes out the top three. Then a property near the Gold Coast comes in fourth, and a home in Adelaide's seaside suburb of Grange rounds out the list. This week's top listing is 488 to 500 Yatala Vale Road, Yatala Vale, South Australia. The property's called Yatalia Manor. It's a luxury accommodation and wedding venue about 17 kilometres northeast of the Adelaide CBD. Sitting on 2.6 hectares of land, the Grand Manor is a classical French provincial inspired estate, boasting 6 bedrooms, 6 full bathrooms, 4 powder rooms, an oversized lift, dedicated butler's pantry and a cinema room. Also features a wood-panelled library, music studio, arts and craft room, a billiards room, a gym and even a hangar. The property sits in the centre of the block of land and is surrounded by massive lawns, vegetable patch, orchard and a giant duck pond. The asking price, $12 million, which according to the real estate agent is the highest price ever for sale in Adelaide. For $12 million, you also receive all the furniture, John Deere tractors and all the future bookings at the accommodation for the next 4 years. Well, let's bring in Anne Flaherty, economist at REA Group. Anne, thanks for your time. First up, about 3,100 auctions this weekend across the country. Seems like strong numbers after the Easter and Anzac Day holidays.
Yeah, you're right. It is a very strong number, given it's the first week back from the holidays. Possibly what's driving that is a lot of this conversation around what interest rates are going to do. There's probably a lot of buyers out there who are keen to get into the market sooner than later for this reason. They might be concerned that, rates are going to rise and they want to get in and fix a rate before fixed rates increase too much more. On the other hand, though, there are probably some buyers out there who may be a little bit nervous about what's going to happen with interest rates and may be taking more of a wait and see approach. But if we look to the next coming weeks, the number of properties coming up for sale does seem to be going down a little, which is what we typically see moving into the winter, quieter time of year.
And let's talk underlying inflation at 3.7% in the March quarter. Do you think the Reserve Bank is going to lift interest rates next week?
That's the question on everyone's lips. Look, I think it's kind of a coin toss at this stage. Inflation was higher than what most in the market were predicting. On the other hand, the RBA in their most recent meeting notes talked about their desire to wait on that labour force data. So it is possible that they might hold off for another month just to see what is happening with wages. The latest wage growth data that we do have is still from December last year, with the next lot of data due to arrive in mid-May, which would be after next week's meeting. So I think that, regardless of whether it's this month or next month, the reality is that we're set to see rates go up far sooner than we had anticipated a few months ago.
Yeah, Anne, and when the RBA eventually do lift rates, do you think it's going to be 15 basis points or would it be more than that?
It's difficult to say. I think that the Reserve Bank have shown that they like to take a cautious approach when moving rates. The other thing to consider is that we haven't seen interest rates rise in Australia in 11 years now. So a lot of homeowners out there actually have never experienced an interest rate rise. The other thing is that Australians are actually more indebted than most countries around the world. So the relative impact of a rise in interest rate on Australian homeowners could be greater than what we would see overseas.
Yeah, and rate rises, it seems like they're inevitable. So what do they mean for the housing market and with all those people out there that have a mortgage right now?
Yeah, I think that we have to remember as well that it's not just the Reserve Bank that decides what the interest rates are. Banks determine their own interest rates. And, for many, many months now, banks have been forecasting interest rates to rise. What that means is that fixed interest rates have actually been increasing since last year. Variable rates, of course, are still at historically low levels, but because interest rates were so low over the last 2 years, a lot of people have actually fixed in their interest rate. So when interest rates do increase, there will be a portion of mortgage holders who are going to have a little bit of extra time before they face those higher rates.
We just had played a grab from Westpac earlier. They're expecting property prices in Australia to fall about 14% from peak to trough, and that's due to these escalating interest rates around the country. Do you expect property prices might start cooling off a bit this year?
We'll definitely see some cooling. I think that, we can be quite confident that the really strong price growth that we saw last year is over. It's at an end. We are seeing cooling pressures emerge. It's important to recognise, though, that Australia's property market is not just one market. There are markets within markets. Every suburb is different property types are different, and this is really crucial to recognise. I think that what we'll see is, across the board, price growth will be far more modest than it has been. But if we think about regional areas, for example, where demand is still continuing to exceed supply, it's reasonable to expect price growth in those areas. The other thing is that whether the Labor or Liberal government come into power, both governments have said that they are looking to support first home buyers. So that will support demand from the first home buyer market. Now, the kinds of properties
Anne,
that those
I'm sorry, Anne, I've got to cut you off. We've run out of time, Anne.
Oh,
but
no
thank
worries.
you very much for joining us on the show. I appreciate it. Anne Flaherty, economist at REA Group.